Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Books and Books in Miami, Florida, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with Alex Segura to discuss his new book, Araña and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow, published by our friends at Marvel Press. Join us as we explore two fan-favorite Spider-Verse heroes together in prose for the first time in this thrilling new time-hopping adventure. Alex Segura is an acclaimed award-winning writer of novels, comic books, short stories, and podcasts. He is the author of the noir novel Secret Identity, a recent LA Times Book Prize winner. His works also include Star Wars Poe Dameron, Free Fall, and the Pete Fernandez Mystery Series. He's won the Anthony Award for Best Short Story 2 years in a row, written comic books including the superhero noir The Black Ghost, The Dusk, and The Awakened, and worked at Oni Press, Archie Comics, and DC Comics. A Miami native, he lives in New York with his wife and children. To moderate this evening's conversation, called a master storyteller by Kirkus Reviews, Chantel Acevedo is an award-winning novelist and the MFA director for the English program at the University of Miami. Just a quick reminder that throughout this broadcast, you can post questions below in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. We'll answer them towards the end. I highly encourage your participation. Please order your copy of Araña and Spider-Man 2099 from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage.
All right.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Good. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. My pleasure. We're here to celebrate this baby right here.
And thank you to Books and Books. Thank you, Sophie, for the very kind intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to start by congratulating you on your recent LA Times Book Award for your fabulous mystery novel, Secret Identity.
That was wild. That was very, like we were talking in the green room, very unexpected, but also very amazing.
Well, so well deserved. So well deserved. And folks watching at home, if they haven't read it yet, they should. And there's a sequel.
From Books and Books. Yes. I'm working on, I'm trying not to call it a sequel. I guess follow-up is the best thing to, it's set in the modern day. It's a new protagonist, and she used to work in comics, but she stepped away, and now she's doing movie storyboards, but she gets pulled back in because this entertainment company announces that they're launching a multi-platform campaign for this obscure character called the Lynx. And so she grew up reading that comic, and she starts working on the relaunch, and then she realizes there's a lot of complications with this character, and there's a trail of murder and deceit tied into it that pulls her in. So I wanted it to kind of work as a standalone. Like if you read Alter Ego by itself, you won't lose anything, but if you read them together, it feels like a bigger story.
Excellent. And when can we expect that one?
Summer next year, hopefully.
Soon.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, but we're here to talk about your new YA.
Yes.
Your new Spider-Man story and Araña story. I gotta say that I sped through it. Enjoyed it so much. It's so readable. Plus, it's beautiful.
This cover is amazing.
Let's take a minute to appreciate.
Carolina Rodriguez, I'm mispronouncing her name, Fuenmayor is the artist, and she is awesome. This was really a nice job.
It's just a nice thing to have on your shelf.
Yeah.
But beyond the outer beauty of it, inside the story is so fun.
Oh, thanks.
And I thought, Alex did it again. Like, I feel like your work has such broad and also specific appeal. And by that sounds crazy. But what I mean by that is comic book fans are going to find all these Easter eggs. They're going to get so excited when familiar characters and stories that they've gotten to know appear on this page. When Ghost Spider appeared, I was like,
oh, cool. Yeah.
Hey, Ghost Spider. It's just really fun, right? Like those moments that people know from the comics are there. Yeah. And on the other side of that coin, you don't have to know the comics to get into this story. Like you could just dip right into it.
Yeah, what's your comic book origin story? I'd love to hear like your comic book background.
My own comic book background?
Yeah, well, like what did you read as a kid? Like I read Archie. I think you read Archie.
Yeah, Archie. As a little kid, it was Archie, and it was like just grabbing stuff in the grocery store without any like continuity. Like just like popping in and out of stuff. And it really wasn't until I was a teenager and I was dating a comic book nerd who I married.
Right.
Very happily.
We
remained married. He's still over there in the other room. That I really got to know comics in a more profound way. And we would do like the weekly run and all of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it was the 90s. So I was very like I'm gonna read the alternative comics.
Vertigo.
You know, like like all the girl power comics that had like a lot of R's in the middle. Girl power,
yeah.
like that. Like
were you into
Girl.
Love and Rockets?
I was not. I loved Action Girl, which was very short lived.
Oh yeah.
And it was like it was a number of artists per issue, and a number of stories per issue, and it also sort of coincided with like my first understanding of what it meant to be a feminist. Like it was, I learned feminism from Action Girl comics, so I credit that.
Awesome.
You know, it's kind of obscure and like Milk and Cheese. I mean, like
yeah.
Like that kind of stuff was like my first thing, but really getting to know the superheroes through his love of the superheroes.
That's cool. You know? What a great bonding.
Yeah, totally. And I was like always like the only girl in the shop, you know.
Yeah.
But that's changed. I think that's a
hopefully,
lot of that
that's gotten better, I think.
Yeah. So, but the book is, it's for people like that, right, who know these stories really well and know the Araña backstory, and they know Spider-Man 2099, and you've got all these fun Easter eggs in there for them. But then I think kids who like only know like Marvel movies. I was thinking specifically of like really reluctant readers who, like, if you've got a kid at home who it's just the movies, right? And it's hard to get a book in front of them. I feel like this is the kind of thing they're just gonna eat it up.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was really trying to hit that balance. Like I put in the Easter eggs, and as I wrote it, I was putting them in almost, as a writer, you put them in for yourself to kind of keep yourself going. But also I knew that on the other end, there would be a huge fan who'd be like, oh, Ghost Spider, or cool, there's Stegron, or there's Demo Goblin. But I really wanted it to feel welcoming to new readers, or people that knew comics maybe from the movies but weren't like super into the Spider-Man comics, but would be willing to like take a risk on the story. And I wanted the introductions to feel succinct, like you didn't feel like you were missing something because you didn't read every issue of Araña or Spidey 2099. Right. So it was hard. It was a challenge, but I think it worked, I hope.
Yeah, well, translating a visual medium,
a
partially visual medium, to completely prose is, I think, part of that. But you've done it. I think you've nailed that transition really well.
Yeah, the internal stuff doesn't on the comics page. It doesn't exist. Like you have, they don't really use thought balloons anymore. Now it's like caption narration, which gives you a little insight, but it's just not as deep as prose. Like prose, you're just in that viewpoint. Like you're in their brain. So and then you don't have that added bonus of an artist visualizing your script. You have to kind of do that work. So it's fun. I mean, we do it because we love it, but
we love it for the challenge too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, I thought it was fantastic. But before we go on and get into it and talk about all the process stuff, it would be great, I think, if you gave viewers at home a taste of the book.
This is the first time I've read from the book out loud. I mean, aside from like my edits. So I'll read the prologue and we'll go from there. Okay. Wait, you're kidding, right? Araña landed hard in front of the creature, half man, half dinosaur. She straightened the large goggles that covered her eyes and braced as the man monster turned to face her. She stole a glance at the group of kids clustered in the far corner of the exhibit, a class of middle schoolers on a late afternoon field trip. They probably hadn't expected to see their educational adventure derailed by a low-rent lizard wannabe. Your name is Stegron? Araña said with a tilt of her head, trying her best to keep one eye on the kids behind the villain. What does that even mean? The creature seemed to lurch forward with deceptive speed. Araña barely managed to sidestep Stegron's arm, feeling a slight breeze as it sped past her legs. My name is Stegron, the monster howled, frustrated at missing Araña. Where is Spider-Man? Why is he sending his sidekicks to do his work? Araña leapt back, her feet landing atop a giant brontosaurus skeleton. She felt her weight disrupt the balance of the bony structure. This would not last long. Come on, Spidey can't be everywhere, Dino Grouch, Araña said. The words tumbled out fast, her nerves propelling the banter more than a desire to quip with a scaly terror that made her nightmares seem tame. You're stuck with me, Araña, 7th most important spider person in New York City. Them's the breaks, huh? Araña pushed down on the skeleton's head with her foot. A low creaking sound grew louder as she put more pressure on. The dinosaur man's eyes bulged as he realized what she was doing. While he watched the soon-to-be dismantled exhibit, she made a slight movement with her head, motioning for the dozen or so kids to dart toward the bright red exit sign. No, what are you doing? Stegron moaned. He seemed hesitant now, scared. Aranya had done her homework before arriving at the Museum of Natural History. Get off, no! You'll destroy the precious creature, stop that! But then he paused, spinning his reptilian head around to spot one of the kids making a break for the exit. With frightening speed, Stegron shot his tail out, knocking the kid backward. Aranya winced at the thud the kid's head made as it hit the linoleum floor. She'd made a mistake, she realized. He'd picked up on her hint, and now these poor kids might pay the ultimate price. Hey, lay off those sprouts, dino bust, Aranya said, watching as Stegron turned back to face her, his mouth baring his sharp teeth. I know it's me you want, not some school children. You overestimate your value, Spider Girl, Stegron spat. I want Spider-Man, not some dime store knockoff. I also want what's rightfully mine, behind those doors. Aranya knew exactly what Stegron was talking about. The museum had just unveiled a new exhibit, one that was linked to one of the most advanced dinosaur research labs in the world. Stegron wasn't interested in animatronic dinos or fossils. He wanted the lab. He wanted access to the DNA samples that the press had been harping on in the lead up to the exhibit's launch. He wanted to upgrade himself. Though, if you asked Aranya, when it came to upgrading, Stegron had nowhere to go but up. Vincent Stegron was a dino expert, she knew, had studied them his entire life, to, like, a scary degree. It wasn't just a calling, it was a damn obsession. Guy loved these extinct creatures so much he injected their DNA into himself, trying to replicate what happened to scientist Kurt Connors. You know, the guy that also turned into a giant scaly monster? The Spider-Man villain known as the Lizard? Yeah, weird role model. The experiment stuck, though, for better or worse. Vincent Stegron basically became a dinosaur. The transfusion turned his skin scaly and hard and gave him strength and speed, and the somewhat pointless power of controlling any nearby dinosaurs. Sadly, the power didn't seem to work on fossils. Aranya smiled slightly as she watched the fallen kid pull himself up. All she had to do, she knew, was give the kids time to escape, give them a chance to survive. Then she could handle this Savage Land flunky. But first, she'd need to distract him.
Thank you so much.
All right.
That opening made me laugh a couple of times. Good. The first time I read it.
Good.
It's so silly. Like this Stegron character is so silly.
Did you know him? Like, were you familiar with Stegron?
Okay. I did not.
It's a deep cut.
That's a deep cut, and the fact that he can control dinosaurs, but there are none to control.
Right. It only helps you, like, if you're like in the Savage Land where there are dinosaurs, but it's not like really a good power in Manhattan.
Yeah. What a surprising power to like learn you have as well.
Yeah. You wake up and you can control like saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah. I love Aranya though. And she quips, right? Like superheroes quip. But you take a moment in the story to say she quips because she's terrified.
Yeah.
And it's something that you don't think about often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, especially it's very similar to Peter Parker, that she's given these powers, but she's not given a mentor. She doesn't, and that's kind of at the heart of the book, that she really wants some guidance on how to be a hero. It's not so much that she wants to be a hero. She wants to do a good job, but she's not sure how to do it. And so I think, and the prologue was a late addition. I think you've probably dealt with this too with books. Sometimes it needs a little punctuation at the end or a little color at the beginning. And I really wanted to show her just doing her thing before we get into like this adventure. So
right. And a little bit of how she became Aranya and all of that. And I do want to talk about all of that, but let's back up a little bit. Tell me the story of how this story came to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did the Poe Dameron book for Lucasfilm, so that was also by Disney with Disney Books, and they, it did well, and they were happy with it, and they said, what do you want to do next? And I love Star Wars, but I said if there's ever an opportunity to work on Spider-Man or any of the Spider heroes, and the conversation kind of went a little further, and they said, which Spider characters would you want to do? And I don't think Aranya and Spidey 2099 have ever had a meaningful crossover in the comics. Like they've been part of like Spider-Verse together or like been in the mega like big events, but never like just them. And I thought there would be an interesting dynamic with the grizzled, like burnt out former Spider hero in Spidey 2099 and Aranya as a new, like just starting out superhero, and how they would play off each other and what they would learn from each other too. Like it's not only her learning from him, like he learns a lot from her without spoiling too much, but it's the arc of their friendship that really kind of attracted me to writing the story.
Yeah. Well, I love stories like that where it's sort of the young, feisty protagonist and the kind of grizzled mentor, right? Who's like dragged unwillingly
Yeah, but you
into
see
it.
this too as a parent. Like I'm always learning stuff from my kids, like how to maybe act with more kindness or more patience or wonder. And I think that's something that maybe you don't see as much in fiction, or maybe you do. But I wanted to have kind of flip the old adage of like the hero and sidekick. Like she's not his sidekick.
No.
She learns from him, but he also pulls from her.
Right. Absolutely. No, they're equals. I think they have equal force on the page for sure. So how was that? I remember we talked a little bit about this because we've done this before, you and I.
Yes.
We've done this dance before when we talked about your Poe Dameron book with Star Wars. Was it the same kind of, let's make sure, like brainstorming with like more than one person on like making sure that this is fitting into like the vision, the Marvel vision?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a little different. Like Star Wars has a committee of basically people that make sure the stories fit into the greater continuity, whereas Marvel, I guess the easiest way to explain it is that this is its own continuity. Like it doesn't fit in between issues. Like it doesn't have to like sync up 100% with the comics. But being a comics person, I was like, I want it to sync up, and I don't want it to negate anything, but I also want it to be my favorite versions of these characters. So I wanted to write Aranya as she was starting, and I wanted to write Miguel, Spider-Man 2099, at a certain point in his story. Like there's a point, and once you read the book, you'll see where he's experienced such great loss that I thought he would give up. He would have surrendered and just stopped being Spider-Man 2099. And the character's publishing history, there's an arc where he's gone for a while, where you don't see any Spidey 2099 until, maybe fairly recently when he started showing up again in the Spider-Man comics. So I thought that this would exist kind of in that gap. So to answer your question, yes, it fits somewhere, but it didn't have to. So
and it had less of that sort of intensity of like
like, oh, this character can't show up because they're over here. There was less of that. It was a little bit more of a freewheeling, but also I had to be mindful that I was using the characters that I was allowed to and mentioning things the way that they should be. So that's where Marvel kind of came in, and then also shaping the story.
Yeah. I get this vision always of Star Wars, like Star Wars people, like standing outside with like blasters. Like if you step, if you say the wrong thing, Star Wars
it's like, the cool thing about it is that they are a resource, and they want you to bring your voice. Like I'm doing a comic book, like a Return of the Jedi one shot, and it's become a low key prequel to Freefall in some ways because it's got so many of the characters. But they want that. They want different voices, and they want you to add to the chorus. But you're in a sandbox, so you shouldn't break the toys, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching this episode of, it was Graham Norton, and they had Pedro Pascal on.
Oh yeah.
And he accidentally calls Grogu Baby Yoda. And there was like his face changed. Like there was a moment where he was maybe afraid that the blasters were pointed at him. Yeah. So funny. I want to remind anyone who's watching us live that they can ask a question. I think Sophie has to maybe enable the chat. But if she would do that, it would be great. And if you're watching us, please ask questions, because we'll have time for those at the end. And if you're watching us on a replay, hello from the past. Hope it was good. All right, so let me ask you this, since we're talking about these characters that are familiar. Oh, the chat's available. There
it's alive.
Yeah, it's alive. Since we're talking about these characters that have existed and have to sort of fit in some way, how do you make these known characters yours?
Yeah, I felt a great responsibility with the characters being one of the first like Latinx authors to write them. Like Steve Orlando has written a lot of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, and I've actually had the pleasure of writing Anya in comics, but this is their first meaningful team up and their first prose adventure, like where they're the stars. So I felt the responsibility. I was talking about this a little bit to a friend of mine yesterday, but I really wanted to show their experience in a lived-in way. I didn't want to like, I how do I say this the right way? I didn't want to overdo it for the sake of doing it. Like I want Miguel is Mexican Irish, and that's just part of who he is. Like it's not something where every 2 bits of dialogue is a nod to his identity. Like the identity doesn't have to be proven or explained. It's just part of who he is. And so I think sometimes writers that are writing outside of their experience will like default to kind of overemphasizing it, and I wanted it to feel much more natural and lived in.
Sure.
So that was really the big, and I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to feel like a Spider-Verse adventure. Like you hopefully watch the movie and you're like, I want more of that. and this book provides that in terms of like a big scope, time travel, like multiple spider heroes doing fun things. So
yeah. I and of course there was the wink to like your Cuban family out there with the tool of, I don't even know how to, I don't want to spoil it, but there's an object, there's a significant object, which is
el
like a
obelisco.
Cuban artifact.
I was like, how do I interject a little Cubano into this whole thing?
I was like, I see what you're doing.
Yes,
but I very much appreciated it
Good.
as well, because that's part of the tapestry of it, you know.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it just felt cool, and I did, you know, I mean, there is no ancient Cuban artifact called el obelisco, but it felt like a fun thing to throw in there, and like, why not?
It's in Marianao somewhere, like they.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gonna bring it out eventually. Awesome. So I have a question about sort of Spider-Man in general, because it seems to me that Spider-Man, more than other heroes, has a big family. Like, there are many spiders, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Just the Spider-Verse is big and extended, and so I was wondering what is it about Spider-Man specifically that maybe lends itself to that kind of extension?
I think, and this ties into kind of my connection with Miguel with Spidey 2099, is the idea of identification and just seeing yourself like as Spider-Man. I think everyone wants to be Spider-Man, and now everyone kind of can. There's a Spider-Man for everyone, but I think the idea of Spider-Man as a superhero inverted the sidekick trope. Like, instead of Batman having a Robin became the hero and had no Batman to tell him what to do or how to deal with his powers. And this is like a testament to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, his creators, but basically the idea that the personal problems overshadow the supervillains most of the time. Like, he couldn't pay rent, or he had the kind of Archie, Betty and Veronica love triangle with Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy, and he was like trying to make sure that his aunt didn't die because she was elderly and frail, and that kind of personal stress and drama didn't exist in superhero comics to the degree that it later did, thanks to Spider-Man and the Marvel explosion of characters. But I think he's just so relatable because he's not like Captain America or Superman or this invincible type character. He has problems, and he has stress, and he's struggling, and he has to go put a paper bag on his head to wash his superhero costume at the laundromat because he's just like a regular guy. And I think that spreads out to different iterations of the character. Now it's not just, you know, when we were kids, it was just Peter Parker. Yeah. And that's what made Miguel, I think, a novelty to me. Like, wow, there's another Spider-Man, and he's like Latino too. Like, that was wild. But now you have this whole like a tapestry of spider heroes that kind of appeal to so many different kinds of readers, and I think it's fascinating. And and I think sometimes I see like, oh, it's too much, but I mean, as creators, you don't have to use them all, and as readers, you don't have to read them all. But I think there's some wonder to seeing like this community of spider heroes across the multiverse. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it just works on so many levels. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's his youth for sure, as part of it, and it's because it's a person in a stage of their life where they're discovering everything, not just powers, but how to be a person, right? And so there's that. I think just even like visually, spiders are like multiple arms, and like it just seems
he looks like a villain. He looked like a villain.
Yeah,
when he showed up. Like, he's got a full face mask. Like, usually even Batman like at least shows you his mouth, or Superman shows you his whole face.
Right.
But Spider-Man just looked super creepy, and he was drawn really creepy.
And his the way the eyes get like elongated with certain artists, but all of it, you know, and spiders are like reproduce in like massive numbers, you know, exactly. So like, oh God, just last week I stepped on a mahogany nut, and it had laid, I don't even want to say it.
Yeah.
Like thousands of spiders crawled out of that thing when I stepped on
God.
it. Yeah. And I was like, well,
God.
That's how many spiders are in the Spider-Verse, I guess.
Yeah, you just cracked open the Spider-Verse. Wow.
It was so gross. But so yeah, it works on lots of levels. But let's bring it back to Anya Corazon, Ariana. How does she fit in that Spider-Man family? Like, what does she bring to the table that's new?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think she brings back that sense of wonder that I think Peter Parker has graduated from. Like, he's been Spider-Man for so long that you don't get that immediate like insecurity or anxiety that I think is super relatable, especially for a YA novel that is about coming of age and that emotional period of time. But I also think she's not like Peter Parker in that he was overwhelmed, but that arc was very quick. Like, pretty soon he was like Spider-Man. That was who he was, and that's how he defined himself. And I think she's questioning it a little bit more and questioning the journey, but still understands the desire or the need to be a hero. So her quips are, like you said, a little bit more born of fear and stress and anxiety, and less about, throwing a zinger at a villain. I think she's struggling, but she's also being much more transparent about it. Like, she's not trying to put on too much of an act. She's like just trying to survive, which I think is different.
Right. I love Aranya so much as a character, and she is sort of sits on the same, I don't know, it's similar to other characters in the Marvel universe, like Miss Marvel. And I know she's had crossovers with Miss Marvel, like they worked together as well. So there's a couple of characters who are like young women, right, teenage girls who have these powers now and are dealing with them in the way that Peter Parker did so long ago. And
like White Tiger too, the current White Tiger, also Latina.
America Chavez too, right? There's a couple, and I feel like it's interesting, right? Because it's all of the things that were appealing about Peter Parker, like the anti-Robin, but the female version of that, and it's amazing that it took so long to get to them. Really,
I feel like there was maybe a hesitation in or maybe watering down the brand by having too many different. I mean, I'm just speculating, but maybe that was the fear. But I think once it hit, it became so popular, and readers love the idea of so many different spider heroes. And I mean, because Spider-Man can't be everywhere. He can't do everything. He's still special. He's the first one, but why not spread the love a little bit and have so many different versions? Like, I love the idea of Ghost Spider. This, like, to kind of reclaim the tragic story of Gwen Stacy and reposition it really is well done. And and if they had hesitated, there would be no like Miguel or Spidey 2099, who's probably my favorite Spider character.
Yeah. My husband's a big fan of him too.
Yeah.
He's cool. Yeah, Spidey 2099. Yeah. He is cool.
I'll give him the book.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about time travel, because this is, on top of everything else, a time hopping adventure, as Sophie mentioned. And I've always thought time travel is the trickiest thing to write. It's like the moment you decide I'm doing time travel, like you've set up a host of problems for yourself. So
like retcons and erasing.
Oh my god, no, it's the moment Marty McFly's hand starts to disappear, right? Like,
I love that moment. I love those movies.
Yeah,
the first two at least.
Oh, I think the third one's great too.
Really?
I love them all. Like, unabashedly, like, I think they're so great.
Yeah, no, I love how they just are one long movie, basically. Yeah.
I quote them incessantly. And I feel like there are few examples of time travel that were handled as well as those.
Yes. I was just going to say, I was just going to say that my kind of guiding light was the Back to the Future movies, like, where you treat it very linearly. Like, it's not about, like, they talk about the paradox, or what's it called, a rift in the space-time continuum. Like, there's that if you do something egregious, but for the most part, you're moving in one direction, and if you hop back, you're right where you were before. And I tried to keep it as clean as possible, because I knew it was for younger readers who are very smart. Like, it's not that they wouldn't understand, but that wasn't, to me, the focus of the story. Like, it wasn't about time travel, and time travel is part of it. It's a mechanism to bring them together. But to me, the story is about their relationship and their friendship and how they become friends, and the journey and how they end up. The arc of character. Like, Anya and Miguel start this way on page 1, and by the end of the book, if they survive, they are different. So
so it didn't intimidate you at all, but the idea of time travel.
I think it intimidated me in retrospect, like when I was like, oh yes, I did that, and I didn't really seem that worried about it, like, while I was doing it. But nobody asked me this question while I was doing it, so I didn't screw up.
No, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, there's no moment where you go, that wouldn't,
I think it's because without spoiling too much, like, she hops forward, then they hop back. There is some time hopping, but it's never to the point where they're like, where Marty, like, sees himself. Like, there's no moments like that. Yeah.
Right.
And even that I thought was handled so well.
So good.
Yeah.
I will quote all the time his mom when she sees herself, and she goes, "I'm old," and she because now I'm like 40 something, and I sometimes will look in the mirror and go,
40th.
40, get out of here. I'm way past 40, but I'm 40 something. And I will look in the mirror and be like, I'm old.
No, I feel like we just became like super best friends, because I love those movies. Though we disagree on part 3.
I mean, you hate it?
I don't hate it. It's just the Godfather 3 of the trilogy. Like, it's just not as good as the first 2.
No, yeah, for sure. But it's still better than most anything else you can sit down and watch, right?
Yeah, I'll watch it if it's on. Like if it's ever on, like we'll stay and watch it. But and I'll defend Godfather 3 too. So.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen Back to the Future 3 more than any other the other ones. And I think it's because maybe it was on play a lot on the TV. Like it just seemed to always be, when I was younger, like it was on more.
That was the one I saw in the theater. I feel like the first two I watched on VHS.
VHS.
From Blockbuster.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Of course. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go a little bit deeper into the story. Okay. And I just want to remind folks that you can ask a question in the chat. Please do. Alex is very good at answering questions.
And you ask great questions.
Thank you. I have a question about sort of theme, or, in the green room, we were talking about like deep, like deep issues in a book. Right. And this is a very fun book. It's a light book, but there is, I thought, just this really beautiful seriousness in the theme of potential that is laced right throughout the book, right? And so without giving anything away, they're dealing with a villain who in essence wants to steal their potential. Yeah. And so I was just wondering where that idea comes from, and are there any parallels in the world that you see now that kind of relate to that idea?
Yeah, I think what I was thinking about, at least in terms of Miguel, it's almost like a sports, like an athlete. Like you see the sports hero that's past his prime or washed up or decides to retire, and Miguel is kind of in that role, except he is doing it a little bit too soon. And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, what if someone took their potential before they were really done, and then they had to retire or end their career, and that's where the idea came that this device could be manipulated to take the potential. And how great for this evil person would it be to take the potential from someone like Anya, who has not even begun to be the legendary hero that she'll certainly be over time. And so I wanted to kind of show what would happen if you saw another path. Like you were like, I'm doing this, but someone altered me in a way that stopped me from really achieving my goals. And what would you do to kind of preserve that? And that's what brings them together. And I think Miguel isn't happy, but is resigned to just be retired and be, living his isolated, lonely existence. And Anya is what really kind of jolts him out of it, because, it says it in the back cover copy, so it's not a spoiler. She gets sent to the year 2105, which is a few years after 2099, and her powers are on the fritz. She's lost. She has no idea what to do, but she knows one thing: there is a Spider-Man here, and Spider-Man will help me. And then she sends up this flare, and Spider-Man doesn't help her. Like he doesn't even show up because Miguel is no longer Spider-Man. And so I wanted to kind of jar her with that, but also jar him by realizing there is a need for me, and maybe something happened along the way that stopped me from tapping into that.
Yeah, he doesn't show up, but luckily he has the most amazing administrative assistant.
Yes, I love Lila.
She's such a good character. Yeah. She's so fun. But yeah, so how about like that idea, which I've never seen in a book before, right? In a novel where someone's talking about sort of a potential being stripped from you. I've never seen it like explicitly said, and I've never seen it in something for children, right? In a book for teenagers. Where'd that come from for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always thinking about, like, as we get older, you think about, well, what if I had done this differently, or what if I had done that differently? And I think I'm always fascinated by, like, what could have happened if you had gone down another path, or potential. I feel like it has to be kind of fostered or cared for. Like parents have to really like bring out the potential in children, teachers, mentors. And, I was fascinated by the idea of like, well, what if someone didn't have that, and what if that was taken away? And then that played in nicely with the idea that there's this MacGuffin, which is this device that takes it away and then rechannels the energy. And then I thought, well, what would the after effects be? Well, these characters become different than what they were intended to be. And so I don't know, that idea, I wish I had a very like specific thing that inspired me about it. But as a parent, I think it was like parenthood, and like we watch our contemporaries, and you wonder, like, this is great. Like, what makes this person great and this person like not as successful in different things? You wonder, like, how do you actualize potential, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that. It just dawned on me as you were talking about the MacGuffin, right? This object, this Cuban object that's like
giant Cuban block.
This Cuban block. I mean, we could get super deep with that, though, couldn't we? Right? Like an entire island whose potential is diverted, in a different way. That's very interesting. it strikes me as something that is like an important story for kids, right? So it's like this important lesson that is in this fun story.
And it's also that it's not just potential in kids. It's like, I think my point was like, we can achieve our goals and our dreams at any point. Like you don't have to be like 16 and then this is your one shot at being the person you want to be. And I don't mean like financial or career success. I just mean like being a good person. You can do it as an adult. You can like reclaim your path and like start to do things the right way or what have you. And I think that's what made it interesting to me, the duality of Anya and Miguel, like at different points in their lives having the same realization because they interacted.
Right. And she's
getting really deep.
Yeah, no, but I mean, see, they're deep depth.
Yeah.
She also doesn't have a sense of limited potential, which I thought was really great about her. And I think that's the other side of that story, which is maybe not the potentials taken from you, but people who might be growing up because of whatever circumstances, thinking the ceiling of potential is real low, actually, right? And there's only so far I can go. And I think she's an example of that's not there. She's a grieving child. She's lost her mother, right? She has certain privileges. Her dad has a good job. She's obviously a smart kid at school and all of that. But there are certain limitations too that she might assume she has, and she doesn't. She's positive in that sense. And
that's one of my favorite parts about her, that even despite these like tragedies, like losing a parent or like social issues at school or what have you, or the stress of like suddenly I have spider powers, like it's not all it's cracked up to be. She still perseveres. She's still like positive and cheerful and tries to do the right thing. Like she could just keep the powers and do nothing. Like that's a much less exciting superhero story, but she chooses to be a hero, which I think is the coolest part of these stories.
And when she's told stay home, it's dangerous, she's like, hell no. Like you can't take that potential from me, right? Like I have the potential to do good. And she says it again, I just want to do good. I just want to do good. And I love that about her. We are starting to get some questions. So thank you. Thank you to folks who are watching in the present.
Yes.
So let's see. So here's a question from Gabriel. He's asking that we're so used to seeing Spider-Verse characters in a comic book context. And again, was the transition to prose challenging for you? We touched upon that a little bit earlier, but what were some maybe particular challenges in that trend? Do you remember a moment as you were writing where you were like, oh, I don't know how to do this, or this is hard?
Yeah, the challenge I think is that you're doing all the internal stuff, which doesn't always exist on the comic page, but you're absorbing the visual part. And where in comics, like, this, like from when we've worked on comics together, where you kind of relay something to the artist and then they make it happen. In prose, you relay it to the reader and you have that kind of connection and you hope the reader picks up on what you're doing. I just tried really hard to not make it sound clunky, because there's some things that just don't translate to prose. Like Spider-Man put on his red and blue skin tight outfit. Like you just describe it differently. Like, you just have to find a path to plausibility, I guess. Like you have to describe these things in a way that doesn't jar you from the world. Like I used to read a lot of superhero prose as a kid, or novels with superheroes in them, and sometimes I would get pulled out because it would just feel, I'm not criticizing anyone in particular, but sometimes the prose just would pull you out of the experience, and I wanted it to feel like it was believable and plausible, and not, in comics you see it's there, so you don't question it. Whereas with prose, you have to kind of almost make it more believable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you do. I noticed it in a couple places where it's so natural, right? When she puts on her goggles, there's a description of the goggles. It was like, I'm wearing goggles because I want to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because the mask is dumb. Because the mask is dumb. So I'm wearing goggles.
Is that yours?
This is my daughter's mask.
Oh, nice.
There was like a trend when the last Spider-Man movie came out that all the teenagers were going to the theater in full Spider-Man costumes. Did that happen in New York? Because that was like a thing in Miami.
Yeah, my son has a costume. Yeah.
All the teenagers were going to the movies fully decked out.
That's intense. Yeah.
Can you imagine like seeing a theater with all these like masked teenagers?
It's a little terrifying.
I think
so they would watch the movie with the mask on.
Yeah. They were like, no, fully dressed.
Wow.
Like full costumes.
I guess you don't want to reveal your secret identity.
I guess not. But so yes,
That's
it's
cool.
Mine. It's not even hers. It's
yours. Yeah.
Dang it.
Gabriel
also wants to know who's your favorite superhero?
Who is my favorite superhero? I started reading Archie were the first comics I read, and that kind of brought me into the medium. But Spider-Man was my first like and my favorite. Like the one, as a reader, you always hop around. Like I love Batman, I love the X-Men, of course, and I love Daredevil and all these characters, but Spidey was always my constant. Like I would always read Amazing or Spectacular Spider-Man, and then the bottom half of my pull list would change, but I would always stick with Spidey. And he's probably the one character I've read the most comics of. Like when my son was born, when my daughter was born, the stress of a new kid, you're just like, you need some kind of distraction. So with my son, I read a lot of Stephen King that I hadn't read because it was better to like be terrified of something else and being a new parent. But with my daughter, I read Amazing Spider-Man from the beginning. Like I started with Amazing Fantasy 15 and I read all the way. I think I stalled out. No, I'm at the JMS run, which was like around 2001. So I read all those Spider-Man comics like over 3 years, and most of them were rereading, but I feel the most like affinity to Spider-Man.
So this must have been very special getting this.
Yeah, this was really cool. This was surreal to like get to even. And without spoiling anything, Peter does show up at some point. Like it's a very meaningful moment. And I was like, I remember texting a friend. I was like, I'm writing Spider-Man. Like, he's in here, and it was like really wild. Yeah.
You resisted a thwip, though. There was not a single thwip.
Yeah.
And the whole thing. Is thwip your favorite sound?
Thwip is like the best sound. It's the best comic sound effect. But yeah, I didn't want to like. It just wouldn't make sense in prose. That's a great example of like. Just wouldn't make sense in the novel.
I think Snicket.
Yeah,
is also a
yeah, his claws snicked out of his.
That's a contender. It's a contender for good sounds. Yeah, those are kind of those comic book shortcuts.
Or Bamf.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But they're those shortcuts that we can't take.
Yeah.
As prose, but I think I challenge you to the next
time. Yeah, I'll put it in there.
To have it in there. Yeah. So again, folks, more questions, and you can always order Aranyan Spider-Man 2099 from Books and Books
and Chantel's books.
Oh, well, thank you. It's our hometown bookstore, and we love this place.
Yes,
let me ask you one final question, and again, if someone watching has a question, please do ask it. But here's my final question. We talked about potential, right? And so I was wondering a little bit about your own upbringing and your own sense of potential, and how was that? Was it cultivated for you by your parents? Is it something you got on your own? Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, my parents were always very supportive. They weren't like, they're readers, but they're not like avid readers. Like it's not a judgment. It's just like my grandparents were super supportive of reading, and like just there was no filtering of what I read. And it's kind of like passed on to me. Like now my son will pick something up and I'm like, as long as you're reading, like whatever is interesting to you, like, I read The Godfather when I was like 8. I should not have been reading that book. I should not have, but I did. And it's kind of like, they were supportive of me just diving in, and I would check out like stacks of books from the library. And I feel like that love of reading, had it not been watered and tended to, would have not turned into what happened. Like I wouldn't have wanted to be a writer. Like, and I remember that realization happened early on, like reading comics and being like, well, what if this happened? Or, reading Sherlock Holmes and being like, oh, what if there was this kind of mystery? And I'm sure you had the same experience too. Like you start making up your own stories even before you can like are aware that that's what writers do.
Right. It's the what if part of it.
Yeah. You start taking these detours.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For me, I was a free range reader, and my mom signed me up to like the kids book of the month club, and I got, all the classics, and she was a reader, and it was all stuff that I should not have read.
Right.
Like Princess Daisy and The Flowers in the Attic. And like, it was all not great for like a little kid. You know what I mean? Like I had lots of questions, but then I was too shy to ask them. Clan of the Cave Bear, like stuff.
Oh that, like the Christopher Pike novels, like
9-year-olds probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you learn.
All kinds of things.
Yeah, you learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah. But it was definitely, it was so available. It was such a word rich environment, for me.
Yeah, no, and it's especially in an era now where like books are being banned and things are being taken away, and it's like the doors should be open for anyone to read whatever they want, obviously within reason, but it's like once you start taking things away or taking options off the table, you're just hurting yourself. We're hurting the future.
Absolutely.
Which is crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Meanwhile, my kids hurt my feelings. I was at the grocery store with my youngest, and she goes, "What are those?" And it was all the Archie comics.
Nice.
And I was like, here's my moment.
Yeah.
Mary Blair, these are Archie comics. It's about these cool teenagers. Like I'm trying to sell it. She picks it up and she goes,
no.
Like such disdain. Like, this is not what I'm reading. But
That's
she
funny, yeah.
she loves manga. Like, she's like
Oh
such
yeah.
a like manga kid, you know? Like, she's found her path.
It's such a fascinating, like, especially in comparison to our comic book culture here in the US, like how prevalent manga is in
Yeah.
Japan. Like, it's just everywhere, and it's
Yeah.
consumed by everyone. There's no like gatekeeping at all. Like, it's just everywhere. It's mass produced. Whereas I think we missed a moment where it went from the newsstand where like you and I as kids could just go into Eckerd's or Publix and get it. R.I.P. Eckerd's. And now, you can get it online, but you have to really make a point of going to a comic shop. And I think there's a few steps that need to get you there, which didn't exist for us.
No, but she's super into it.
That's awesome.
So
yeah,
more
my son
power
loves
to her.
superhero comics. He's like super into. We've been reading Marvel Team Up, which is the old Spidey comic where every issue he meets up with a different hero, and he's just loving that. Like, it's like a tour of the Marvel universe.
Does he hurt your feelings at all if you reject something you love?
I'm trying to think what he did. I'm actually waiting for the moment where he starts to like something that I just have no connection to. Like, he was talking about Sonic, and I was like, like, it's not for me. Like, I missed the boat on that. Like, I played Sonic, when I was a kid, but then I stopped, and then so there'll be a time where he gets super obsessed with something that I'm just not into, but hopefully not anytime soon.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, parenthood.
Yeah.
We have another question has popped
nice.
in. Yeah. And so we got two actually. One is from Alejandro. I know Alejandro. Hello, friend.
Hello.
And Alejandro wants to know. Alejandro's a writer. He's got a novel coming out soon.
Oh, congrats.
Yes.
Do you know what genre?
Yeah, literary novel. It's
awesome.
About Cubans and Cuban Americans. It's gonna be great. So Alejandro wants to know, if Spider-Man pulls his punches like the comics suggest, what do you think the effect of always having to regulate his strength is on Peter? Always having to measure himself when he gets dressed, opens a door, hugs a friend. How does not being able to live up to his true potential impact Peter? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I always envisioned it that, he has to pull his punches in combat, like when he's cutting loose, like it's something he taps into when he's using his power to fight or to lift something or do anything else like physical. But in the day-to-day, like, he kind of just goes into an autopilot and doesn't have to do it every second. Otherwise, I feel like he would be he's already pretty anxious, but he would be the most anxious and like stiff person on earth. So that's how I see it in my mind, that he does pull his punches when punching a bank robber who's just a regular human and he can lift 10 tons with a hand. Or when he's fighting, like, even villains like the Lizard, he has that emotional connection to his alter ego. So he's not going to cut loose. But I don't think it is as prevalent in his day-to-day. I don't know if that's a cop-out, but that's how I always saw it.
I kind of agree with you. And I just always kind of chalked it up to like his spider nature. Like, spiders aren't always like spitting venom, like they're like it turns on and off, as opposed to like, this is a question I've never thought of about any other character but Superman. And I've always thought that Superman is like eggshells his whole life, and he must be
Superman or the Hulk, but the Hulk doesn't really think about it because he's always cutting loose anyway. But what I always thought about is like, wow, there must be like a huge body count of people that are just like caught up in the Hulk. Just hulking out. Yeah. So
complete destruction. But Spider-Man must be the most like uptight.
Yeah. Superman.
Like, Superman rather. He must like just break stuff all the time. Like,
well, imagine like him holding a baby. Like, he could just like, it's got to be so, like, he's just got to be in such great control. Like, I think about it when he's sleeping, like when they show him sleeping, but then you also realize he probably doesn't have to sleep that much.
Superman's a whole other story.
Yeah, it's a whole other
he's a whole other
podcast.
Thing. That's right. Well, Samantha wants to know, is there another Marvel comic that you would consider doing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, they had me write an Aranya story for Edge of Spider-Verse #1, which was really fun. I did an Avengers Unlimited, like, which is the Marvel like digital Infinity Comics, a 4-parter with Spider-Woman, which was really cool. And I've got some other stuff happening. I have a Star Wars comic, but in terms of like another prose adventure, I love the X-Men. Like, if not Spider-Man, then the X-Men. Like, that idea of outcasts being like jammed together and forced to fight for a world that doesn't want them. Like, it feels very resonant to me. Like, that sense of other is really interesting. And this idea that superpowers aren't always like super cool and sexy. Like, sometimes, like Rogue, you can't even touch anyone. You can't even like kiss your boyfriend. Like, you are like trapped in your body forever. It's I think it really resonated with me as a teenager, like an awkward teenager in middle school, like that outcast mentality. And I think it still resonates today to a lot of people. So
Yeah. No, I think if I had to pick one, it would be X-Men for sure.
Yeah. Who's your favorite X-Man? X-person?
Gosh. I feel
Is it
like
Jean Grey?
no. I feel like Rogue is one of them. Like Rogue's up there. She's so tragic.
Yeah.
She's so tragic that she's so compelling. I think Professor Xavier. I mean,
Oh,
Professor X is.
interesting.
I mean, he's. How can you not love him? You know,
Yeah, I
really.
feel like sometimes people like default to making him like the secret villain, and I
Yeah.
find that he's most appealing when he's not the villain, when he's trying really hard to do well and he makes mistakes.
Yeah. And then the one that appealed to me as a kid was Jubilee because
Oh yeah,
I always liked the like whatever it was, like the younger female happy character was always the one that was like would speak to my like My Little Pony loving heart. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that was
The
the
cartoon I think was on, and she was on the cartoon.
she was so sparkly.
Yeah, yeah, she was a great viewpoint character.
Yeah, no, totally. Kitty Pryde's fun.
Oh yeah.
In terms of like powers, I think are useful and great. But yeah, probably Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue is
because she breaks my heart.
Yeah, such a bummer. But it's also such a classic mutant character. Like
yeah.
And a villain. Yeah. What I loved about the X-Men is that there were villains that became heroes. Like Magneto was a hero for a time. Rogue started as a villain. Like Wolverine seemed like a villain at first and then became like integral to the X-Men. So I think there's just like a lot of ground to cover.
I think so too. Well, let's put it in the universe for you.
Yes.
Because I would read.
Let's manifest it.
The heck out of that novel.
Yeah.
For sure. Who would be the point of view character?
I am like a big Cyclops stan.
He's tragic too.
Yeah, I feel like he's really tragic and I could relate to that idea of always trying to be the good leader and then kind of compartmentalizing your own trauma or issues. I'm not a huge Wolverine person, but he's starting to grow on me a little bit.
He's starting to.
Yeah, 40 years into my 40 odd years into my life, like I'm starting to feel for him.
Starting.
Yeah.
The heart breaks a little.
Yeah. Well, Alex, like the Punisher, I was never super into the Punisher.
Oh, me neither.
Yeah. But,
yeah.
You know.
That I think there's a rage there that I could never.
I just don't relate to that.
I couldn't hang with it too long. Yeah, like it was. I was like, okay, enough.
Did we have another question came in, or
did we? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think Alejandro was just saying, I like that theory.
Oh, good.
He said, I like that theory about Spider-Man holding back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, well, otherwise el pobre, right?
Otherwise el pobre. But el pobre, all of them. And that's something that happens. Yeah. Miguel tells Araña all the time, you're losing your powers, good.
Yeah, you should be happy.
You should be happy, you know, and I feel like that echoes, I think, so much of what we think of as superheroes, and they're both so interesting, but they're so tragic too.
That was the toughest part of the book for me to write was the Miguel, just the darkness. There's a stretch there where he like goes to a place that reminds him of a great tragedy, and it was really hard to like.
Yeah.
You know, he's really a fallen hero in this book, and so hopefully, you know, if you know he reclaims his heroism, but you'll have to read it to find out.
You have to read it to find out, and I hope everyone does read it and gets a copy of it. Alex, it is always such a pleasure speaking with you. Such a joy. You too. We'll do this again.
Yeah, we'll do it in person
for the
sometime.
next one. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thanks thank you all for watching. Thank you for your questions.
Thanks, Books and Books.
Thank you.